Welcome to another episode of Tools, Talents, and Techniques. I'm your host, Dustin Sutton, and today we have a remarkable guest. He's a retired Navy SEAL, and he is the Chief Executive Officer at ComSafe AI. Welcome, Mr. Ty Smith. I'm not going to give any more of an intro for that because I just want to let you shine with what you say. So, Ty, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. That intro was good enough, so thank you. I really appreciate being here. I'm excited to be here and share some traits of knowledge with you today. So let's do it.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I want to talk about what you're currently doing. Could you just give a brief introduction yourself about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, right on the Illinois-Missouri border, but on the Illinois side of St. Louis. Graduated high school at 17, didn't really have anything, to go on, but a dream in my back pocket of becoming a Navy SEAL someday. So I joined the military. Fortunately, had a phenomenal career in the Navy for 2 decades. I spent most of that time as an operator in the SEAL teams. I retired in 2016 and was fortunate enough to get into Marshall Business School at USC, where I completed my MBA, rather my MBV, my Master of Business for Veterans degree. And as I was retiring from the SEAL teams and finishing my master's at the same time, I built a technology-enabled security consultancy that was doing fairly well. And then COVID reared its ugly head and showed us that we were going to have to find another way to win. And because that is the lesson that I learned over the last 2 decades in the military, which is we don't quit anything, we simply find another way to get to target and win. That's what we as a team decided to do. And so Vigilance Risk Solutions actually became ComSafe AI, the venture capital backed artificial intelligence company that I'm running now that's headquartered right here in beautiful Southern California. And I've been running ComSafe AI for about the last 4 years. It has been the most difficult thing I've ever done, even more difficult than being a career Navy SEAL, in my opinion. But I'm also very, very grateful when I look back on where I came from, Dustin, where I started in East St. Louis as this poor kid that, didn't think he would ever have anything because I was listening to people tell me that and listening to people tell me I could never go to college and on and on and on. Um, it's a pretty cool story to look back and realize that even if by just not knowing any better, I didn't listen to any of those people and I stayed on my path and it led me to where I am right now. And I'm just incredibly grateful for where I am.
And it's very impressive as we go through the story. Even what you said is already impressive, but we're going to go into some details here. You mentioned that you wanted to be a Navy SEAL early on. Can you expand on that? Like, when did you first realize that what Navy SEAL was, or military in general? Like, when did this idea start to really gain traction in your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. So, fortunately for me, I come from a family of servant leaders. My mom's a retired 27-year police officer in East St. Louis, one of the roughest cities on the planet, especially for a female police officer, but she thrived in that environment. And I think that's where I got the fire in my gut from. But also, even though I only had a few uncles, most of them served either Army, Air Force. I was the only one that went Navy, and that rubbed off on some of us in my generation that came up behind them. And one of my uncles in particular, my uncle Kelvin, who, technically isn't my blood uncle, but he's my uncle. He's been married to my aunt Septoria, my mom's sister, gosh, for almost, and this is the first time I've actually acknowledged this because we were just talking about our ages for almost 40 years, actually a little more than 40 years. He has
Wow.
been married to my aunt, and they got married when he was joining the army. And so, they would come home and I would look up to him as this figure that was just larger than life, man. And just I had never met anyone like him. And he was this positive male role model that I didn't have, at least not at that level. Because again, my other uncles were great. And they've all unfortunately since moved on to a better place, other than my Uncle Kelvin, the one that I'm telling you about. But he was different.
When you
I
say a
got
better place, better than East St. Louis?
Yeah, they're in heaven now.
No,
And
I'm sorry. I was kidding.
oh, no, 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 it's
Better
okay.
place is better than East St. Louis.
Wow. Brother, at this point, I got to tell you, I really hope that heaven is better than East St. Louis. But going back to my Uncle Kelvin, or my Uncle Poochie is what we've always called him since I was that 4-year-old little kid looking up at him, for the very first time when my aunt brought him home. I just always knew there was something different about him, and there was something in him that I wanted to emulate. And then fortunately for me, he was drawn to me too. And he became that uncle that was always showing up at the football games, or the uncles that would come and watch me wrestle, or the uncle that took me fishing nearly every weekend. He became that person for me growing up, and I think that impacted me tremendously. And so when I was 12 years old, I was sitting on the floor in my house, leaning against the couch. My mom was sitting on the couch next to me, and so my right shoulder was leaning against her left leg. And this movie came on the television called Navy SEALs, starring
Mhm.
Charlie Sheen. And my mom and I watched that movie, and I was just hooked. I think I fell in love for the very first time that day, and that is a dream that I grabbed out of thin air. I put it in my back pocket, and fortunately, it was something that God told me, keep it there and don't forget about it. There's a job that I have for you at some point, and that was what did it. And so I went through the rest of school, being the kid that I was, and just trying to figure out, where I fit in, and what was next. And when I graduated high school, I wasn't. Honestly, I didn't feel like I was smart enough to go to college at that time. I hadn't even applied to any colleges. I hadn't even taken the ACT, SAT, at least not that I can remember. I'm pretty sure I never even took those exams when I was a senior in high school, because in my mind, college just wasn't an option for me. And so I graduated high school, went and saw Chuck, the local Navy recruiter, and he got me signed up. And that was in 1996. And I left East St. Louis and never looked back.
Where did you go first from East St. Louis? Where was your first station?
So, so these are very fun questions you're asking me, by the way, because it gives me a chance to kind of reminisce on what was a very special time in my life, which is my military career from beginning to end. Now that I can look back, having retired 8 years ago, I have to acknowledge, gosh, what a special time in my life that was. And I can remember like it was yesterday, the night I left for boot camp, the night I left home, the night that my family, sent me out to face the world alone and unafraid. And I remember checking in at MEPS in St. Louis, and I forget what MEPS stands for. It is an acronym, but I forget what it is. It's basically, hey, this is everybody show up here. We're going to do all your paperwork. We're going to process you, and then you're going on a boot camp, whether it be Navy boot camp, Army, Marine Corps, or whatever. And so I remember getting to MEPS and kind of being shuffled around, and everyone telling you that, like, hey, you're going to get in this line and get on this bus, and this is where you're going. And I was just kind of like trying to follow the trail. And they put me on a flight, and I always wondered, why did they just fly me 30 minutes from St. Louis to Chicago? Because I showed up to boot camp at Great Lakes, Illinois the very next day. But I I answered the question that way for a reason, and it's because I wanted to share with everyone that that was the first night in my 45 years of living where I truly, for the first time in my entire life, um, I truly felt alone. I truly felt like real loneliness, real fear of I don't know what comes next, and my safety net is gone. Where is my mama right now? Like that was the first time in my life I ever actually experienced that as a young man. And that question in the back of my head of, oh my gosh, what did I just get myself into? You
Mhm.
know, but it took about a day, and that was it. That went away. I got settled into my division in boot camp. You know how it is. Like boys generally, they gravitate toward one another, and I had my little clique, and the rest was history. I was ready to go tackle the world.
Wow. And so, as far as like the process of being enlisted and towards your goal of becoming a Navy SEAL, how long is that time period? Because it sounds like you're in, like your foot's in the door, you're in the military, you're there, you get over this fear of the unknown, but then what are the next steps to actually realizing your goal of getting on a SEAL team?
Yeah, so there was about a 5 year gap between that night in boot camp that we were just reminiscing about and me actually getting into the SEAL teams. And so my first duty station, I mean, I went through like all of my A school, my in the Navy, your job, we call it a rate. Like in the Army, they call it an MOS, which is what some people are used to hearing. But in the Navy, we call it a rate. So you go through all your rate specific training, hopefully, because you don't want to be what we call undesignated, which means that we don't know what we're going to do with you, and so you're just going to go chip paint on a ship until somebody figures it out. So fortunately, I had a rate. I had done at least well enough on the ASVAB, the military's entrance exam, to where I could qualify for a rate, and actually a really decent and a very technical rate. And so they sent me to Pensacola, Florida, to do air crewman candidate school, search and rescue swimmer school, anti-submarine warfare school. And I got down there, and that's just not what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a SEAL, and I made that very clear that I wanted to be a SEAL, and that's why I joined the Navy. And so I ended up, as this brand new 18-year-old kid in the military. Like I made quite a lot of noise, you know, while I was in training, because I was just trying to explain to people, hey, I'm in the wrong place. Like, y'all don't understand. I am in the wrong place. This isn't where I'm supposed to be. I know that you want me to go through rescue swimmer school first so that you can see if I can actually swim, but this is just a roadblock, an obstacle in the way of me doing what I want to do. Like, okay, you want me to do rescue swimmer school? That's fine. Okay, I'm done with that. I actually graduated number one swimmer in the class. Can I go to SEAL training now? Right. And God works in mysterious ways, and he doesn't make a single mistake. And so I ended up getting what I wanted, in that one of the warrant officers pulled me aside one day and was basically, young man, the Navy's put a bunch of money in training you to do this, but I see you got a dream in front of you, so I'm going to let you go, whether I like it or not. And I wish you the very best of luck. And we're going to send you out into the fleet to see what happens. And, good luck getting the SEAL training. And I ended up going to Sardinia, Italy, as a military police officer. And it was one of the best things to ever happen to me in 45 years. Again, God doesn't make a single mistake. I got to Sardinia, Italy. I was 18 years old. And I remember showing up to Italy, and I wasn't lonely and scared like I was that first night at boot camp, but I was concerned because all of the guys that I'd been running with in the Navy at that point, of course, they all looked like me. They were all African American, and like we were all brand new 18-year-old kids in the military, just trying to figure out life, right? And every one of them had came from, they'd all come from pretty rough places to grow up in too, just like me. And so, honestly, and I'm not saying this pejoratively, I'm actually saying this with empathy. They were just as young and ignorant and dumb as I was. And so, when I got these orders to Sardinia, Italy, all these guys were like, "Oh my gosh, you're going to hate it, and those people are going to hate you. These are the most racist people on the planet. Blah 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 blah. My goodness, you're going to be racing back to the United States." And of course, as an 18-year-old punk kid, I believed those guys. And so, flying into Italy, I was concerned, like, hey, what have I just gotten myself into? But I have to tell you, it was as opposite gets. It was 180 degrees the other direction. It was a dream. It was
Mm,
amazing. From the first day I landed in the Rome airport, to the very sad day I left 5 years later and approximately 4.5 months after 9/11, because my SEAL training package was approved a week after 9/11. Um, it was it was just a very special time, and I can even remember my last night there, and I didn't sleep because I'd been there for 5 years. I built my life there. Italian had become my second language, kind of in a way my first language, because the whole 5 years I was there, I spoke more Italian than I spoke English. The Navy trusted me, because I had taken the initiative to learn Italian, and I did it because I wanted to. But the Navy rewarded me for that initiative and ended up putting me in a role where I was responsible for being a liaison between the American military police and the Italian kind of they are the highest level of law enforcement in that country. And in the United States military, when you're a military police officer, you have very little jurisdiction outside of the military, very little. But in Italy, the Carabinieri, like, they are law enforcement, and you do what they tell you to do right away, and they do not play around. And so,
Mm.
fortunately, I got put right in the middle of them, and I was being mentored by American sailors and by Italian sailors, and all of my friends were Italian, and that was really, really cool. And as I started to really embrace the culture and the people embraced me, like, that was the second time that I fell in love in my life. And I didn't want to leave. I was supposed to only be there for 2 years. And then the deal was I could get to SEAL training after doing that 2 year billet in the fleet. But I kept re upping. Give me another year. Give me another year, because I was just having so much fun and my life was so incredible. I was this young, pre 20 years old, African American guy living in Sardinia, Italy, where most people didn't look like me at all. But I felt like I was experiencing for the first time, really, like, they don't care. Like, I came over here really scared and they were gonna, be racist and discriminated against me, but like, that's just not what I'm experiencing.
Hmm.
These people see me trying to learn their language and they're embracing me for it. And they're treating me like I'm a part of their family. And I felt like I had become a part of the family the 5 years I was there. And I did, to the point where even to this day, when I take my wife and we're excited to take baby Josephine. She's 4 now. There for the very first time. We haven't taken her yet, obviously, because of COVID and all of that stuff. And she's only 4 now, but we're excited to take her there because even my wife is blown away by how people react when I get there and
Hmm.
how they talk and how they tell people that haven't met me, like, no, he doesn't look it, but he's Sardinian. He's ours. Like, America can claim him, but he's ours. And it makes me feel very proud in my heart when they do that, because I know that they mean it. And so I was having a blast. I didn't want to leave. To be honest with you, Dustin, like, my dream was kind of fading away because I was living life and I was having fun. And I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get out of the military. I'm gonna stay in Italy. I've applied to the University of Rome. Like, I'm just gonna build my life here.
Well,
That's how
that
much.
was gonna be my question. Like, as things are going so well, it's like your dream of being a Navy SEAL. You're like, well, this reality is
It
kind
was
of better than
really
my
cool.
dream could be. Yeah,
It was really cool. But everything changed on September 11th, 2001.
yeah.
Everything changed. My entire life, the entire trajectory of my life, because I had been in Sardinia for about 4.5, almost 5 years. And I had been home to East St. Louis to visit my folks, I think maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. And I got a call one day, uh, that came in through, like, the Navy's emergency line, Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. And, these people were telling me, hey, your mom's really sick. She's in the hospital. You need to go home. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, because this is before, we all had these smartphones and where you could just go on Facebook and see what's going on, or I literally just call somebody in another country right now. We didn't have that. And so for me, I was just like, oh my God, I got to get home. And so fortunately, they were like, nope, we already bought your tickets. Boom, boom, boom. You're leaving tonight. And I was like, wow, thank you. And so I get on this flight and I'm flying from Sardinia, Italy to St. Louis by way of New York City on September 11th, 2000. So about, gosh, if I remember correctly, it was a few hours. I think it was about 3.5, 4 hours into the flight. The pilot comes over the intercom and he announces, ladies and gentlemen, we have to down this aircraft immediately. We don't know exactly what's going on, but something is happening in the United States of America and all airspace is being closed. And we were over a small town just outside of London, I think. And this is also, remember, this is during the times, Dustin, where they had those wired mobile phones in the back of the headrest in front of you, and you can pull it out, take your credit card, swipe it, and you could make a
Mm-hmm.
call. Well,
Yep.
I was sitting on the port side of the plane, the left side for people that weren't in the military or on a rowing team, and I was in the aisle seat. And so on the starboard side or the right side of the plane, or I'm sorry, port side, left side, starboard side, right side, and in the aisle seat closest to me was an old black lady that was probably two shades blacker than I am. Like she was darker than me. And that is of note because once the pilot finished talking, she pulled out that phone, got her credit card, swiped it, called her husband in New York City, and was like, hey, what's going on? The lady gets off the phone. She doesn't say a word. She hangs the phone up. As she's on the phone, what stood out to me is that this lady, when I sat down, she was about two shades darker than me. And I literally watched the blood drain from this lady's face. And by the time she hung up the phone, she was about your complexion. First
Wow.
time in my life I had ever seen that. And everybody, like people are peering over seats, they're kind of like looking back like, hey, what's going on? And she says kind of in a low voice, and I don't know if this is because, she was just so impacted by what her spouse had just told her, or if she had the wherewithal to know I shouldn't yell this, people are going to panic. But she kind of looked up and without really looking at anyone, she just said, terrorists are flying airplanes in the skyscrapers into New York City right now. And not, you could hear a mouse pissing on cotton. Like people just kind of fell into their seats, just not knowing what to do, what to say. Um, Nothing. And so they ended up downing the plane. I jumped on a train, got my behind down to the embassy in London, checked in, called my command, let them know I was okay. They were obviously freaking out because they didn't know which plane I was on or where exactly I
Mm-hmm.
was. Um, and I was stuck in London for a few weeks. By that time, my mom was okay. She was out of the hospital. They reopened airspace a few weeks later. I was able to get home. I only stayed for a couple of days because clearly some things were changing. And then I got on a flight back to Sardinia. And the day I got back, my command master chief pulled me in the office and said, hey, are you in shape? You ready to go? I said, yeah, I am, Master Chief. He goes, good. Your orders just came in. You are leaving at the beginning of February 2002 to go to Coronado to go to Budge training. And the rest was history. Like I said, that day changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Wow. That's a remarkable story. On a plane, heading back for another reason on September 11th, getting turned around. That's wild. Um, that experience also, would you, because remember before you said like, oh, I'm thinking of getting out, but then that day, and then you're like, okay, I'm going. Did you feel like it reignited your fire for Navy SEAL? Is that what you're kind of alluding to with that?
Well, it wasn't that it reignited my fire because the flame never went out. I
Mm,
was still training every day, all day, as though I was leaving for SEAL training tomorrow. And
mm,
fortunately, that's just me. I'm an athlete. That's who I am. I want to be in shape. I want to feel good. I want to test myself. I want to brutalize myself with physical training and prove that I'm worthy of standing next to the people to my left and my right. But the dream was very much so alive. And I was just fighting with my career counselor that was in Sardinia about, hey, like, where are my orders? Like, no, yeah, I'm happy here. And I'll say, sure, I'll stay another year, but this is where I'm trying to go, right? But the whole time I was there, every day, they literally called me the crazy American because that's how I train. People would see me running from the ocean by myself at like 4 o'clock in the morning, sun's coming up. I will have just finished a 2 mile swim in the ocean by myself before the sun even comes up. And I'd have shoes and stuff staged on the beach. And now I'm headed out on a 10 mile run. This is all before I even go to work. And like,
Mhm.
this is how I lived my life all day, every day. And even my friends, the Italians that were my best friends, these guys are still some of my best friends to this day. They were all athletes. And so I even fit in with a group of people that championed that way of life. And fortunately, I was introduced to, there were a pair of Italian Navy SEALs that were at their command that was like right around the corner from my naval command. And to this day, I don't know why, Dustin. Maybe it was because of one of my best friends, Nino Spinelli, who introduced me to them, because he loved me so much, but they immediately loved me and believed in me. Immediately. And there were no jokes about, oh, ha, you might not make it or blah, blah. It was just immediately, yeah, we want to hear that. You can do it. Yeah, we know some American SEALs. You're just like those guys. You can do it. And I'll never forget those dudes, ever.
Mm,
Ever. That is the power of leadership right
yeah,
there. Leadership by example. And if the fire was beginning to lull a little bit, those dudes were like, let me fan that for you a little bit, And
yeah,
so the dream never died. The opportunity just became clear and present once 9/11 happened, and I snatched it the moment they offered it to me.
yeah. That's amazing. Um, you join the SEALs. You go through the training. You're obviously well prepared for, or excuse me, I'm just kind of putting that out there. Did you feel like all your training prepared you well for the
Oh
buds
my
training?
gosh. Oh, yeah, I was in the best. I showed up there in the best shape of my life. And fortunately, I mean, remember, man, I was swimming 10, 15 miles a week. I was running, gosh, probably anywhere between 50 and 75 miles a week is what I was running. I mean, I was a young man. Nothing hurt. I didn't have any
Yeah,
injuries to complain about. Like I could just go forever. So no, I was in great shape when I showed up and I was ready. And more importantly, up here, I was ready.
yeah,
I'm there without a doubt. I knew it in the bottom of my heart that I was ready. And having that kind of confidence, and that was the first time in my life I felt that kind of confidence about something I wanted. Because growing up, I football was my passion, but I sucked at it. Right? It was my passion. I had the heart of a lion. Like, who do you want me to hit, coach? Get out of my way. I don't care if he's 300 pounds. I'm going. Right? Like
yeah,
that was my heart always. But I didn't have the I didn't have the natural God given athletic gifts. I didn't have the speed, the strength. I was malnourished for the most part, to be honest with you. And I didn't have the critical thinking that you learn it takes to be a world class athlete. Like it's just total package. I didn't have any of that. I was wrestling and I fell in love with wrestling because that's where I learned that. And I feel like wrestling more than anything prepared me for what I was really getting into later in life because wrestling was that one on one, mano a mano. If we lose, there is no we lose. It's I lose and it's my fault. Can't blame anyone else. And then the other side of that coin was I learned something about myself in wrestling that would later propel me through the rest of my life to include SEAL training. I learned that even though, like, yeah, sure, I don't have all of these gifts that I was mentioning that I needed, being in love with football, going to go to NFL just like the rest of my friends wanted to, but becoming a high school wrestler, I learned that there is not only a killer instinct inside of me, but I have like very uncommon will and grit in order
mm,
to pursue that. And it was in wrestling that I learned that, wait a minute, I don't have to be big. I don't have to be strong. I don't have to be smarter than this person. I don't have to have these natural God given gifts. I only have to push and never quit and be willing to push through all pain and never quit. And when I discovered that, even guys that were stronger and more accomplished than me, when I discovered that I could knock them off their game by simply showing them from the opening whistle that I am about to drag you into water that is so deep, you don't even know what you got into. That's what I really discovered, and it propelled me through everything. If I'm willing to work, nothing can stop me.
So, I don't want to skip too much right now, but I want to be like, because what you're saying right now and what we talked about before we press record, we're talking about entrepreneurship and we're talking about some of these things that where that is in your life and where you are now. And again, I know I just
Right
jumped
now,
over right now, and you're like, okay, this is the goal, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to use everything that I've experienced, whether it be from wrestling, from swimming, from Navy SEALs, like your life experience and what you're bringing to that. Is that something that like how do you fuel that? I mean, how do you channel that? Do you have things, because it's called tools, talents, and techniques?
yeah.
Do you, I don't know, meditate, journal? Do you run? Like what are the things in your life that you do to keep that channeled? Like exactly
Very
that
good
determination.
question. Very good question. So I do all of that stuff except running because I can't run anymore, unfortunately, because I've had 5 knee surgeries. I have one fake knee already. I'll probably get another fake knee here over the next several years. And so instead of running, I do other things that give me a very good cardiovascular charge. But one thing that I like to tell my tribe is that, hey, if you become a casualty to stress, you're not going to do yourself and your tribe any good. So balance is incredibly important. And balance is a part of, all these tools I've added to my toolkit over the years, just like, the tool of uncompromising grit and how far it can take you either in this moment or in life. That lesson I learned from wrestling. I've just been putting all these tools in my toolkit and understanding when and where to use them. And I have to go back to that lesson that I learned when I started wrestling because I think it's such a powerful lesson, especially when I consider where I am in my life right now. I feel like I am in a transitional state in my life. I'm 45 years old and I can feel it. I am transitioning from one season to the next. But for the first time in my life, I don't know what that next season looks like. And it's kind of scary because life as an entrepreneur is very volatile and scary, right? And
Hmm.
I could win and be very well off, or I could lose and go, oh, I got to start over. Who knows? But make no mistake, this is where that lesson comes into play because I learned a very long time ago how you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be the strongest person on the mat or on the playing field. You don't have to have the most cunning. You just have to have the will. And it has to be uncompromising. It has to be defiant. It has to be so overwhelming that against all odds, the world, not just you, the world has no choice but to believe you and that you are going to win. And that was the lesson that I took immediately from wrestling. And it's propelled me through everything that I've done. I don't have to be the biggest, baddest, you know, in effort in the room. But if I have the will to push even through suffering, if I have the will to show up every time, even if it's just to show up to suffer, if I have the will to never stop, I can win. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. There is nothing that will get in my way because whatever that obstacle is, I assure you, it will break and it will be exhausted well before I ever get there. And I learned that all those years ago in wrestling. And the SEAL teams just taught me how to hone that, Dustin. That was all.
Yeah. I until this probably past year, like I had never, I probably would have heard what you said and been like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But now I'm like, yeah. Like I've never felt like this before. I have felt like this before. Like I'll give you an example. I have felt that I would rather try and fail than not try. Like that
Yes.
feeling. And that's a very empowering feeling too. Like I feel compelled to do this. I don't know why, but like I'm gonna try it and give it a shot. But also there's a very laissez-faire attitude towards that. Like if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but I'll give it a shot. I've done that a lot, and we can go into psychology of non-attachment of like why I didn't do that. But
Mhm.
whatever. There's that. But with the stuff that I'm doing now and how I feel now, it's almost like it doesn't matter what anybody else says or what they try or whatever. Like I'm doing this, and
Yes.
my whole being feels like this, and it's an undescribable feeling, and I feel like I've been rudderless for many years, and I've had certain levels of success and things. I have a great family. I love my community. I love the things that I do. But as far as that thing, that like that goal that I'm going towards, like it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear at all. But now that it is, like what you're saying is right in the sweet
That's,
spot. It's
and we just
everything.
have to accept, right? We just have to accept that because it's worth it, it's going to be hard. We just have to
Mhm.
accept it. And I think that hitting the acceptance phase is critical. It's critical. And the best way that I can kind of put this into context is like I don't do you ever do cold water therapy or extreme heat therapy, right? Ice bathing, maybe sitting in a
Not
sauna.
Not regularly, but yes, I
Okay.
do, and I have.
So I've loved them both for a very long time. I just think there's something about pushing yourself. We have to test ourselves. We can't have a testimony without first passing a test. And so there is no secret that you know plenty of hometown heroes and super talented individuals have been defeated on the first day of SEAL training, and not by the instructors but by the cold water. I don't care
Mm,
who you are, that is just prepare yourself. Right? The cold
mm,
water sucks. No matter who you are, you never get used to it. But something that I've learned, especially later in life, as I do, cold exposure. I did it twice yesterday, and I was talking myself through this both rounds yesterday. Ty, do you simply accept what is? Yes, I do. Okay, well then accept the fact that you're cold and move on from it. Go think about something else for the next 3 minutes. Acknowledge that you're cold. Yes, this sucks. Accept it. Now, are you going to keep going and get the mission accomplished anyway? Yes. Well, then let it go. Stop
mm.
dwelling on it. You could focus on this obstacle in front of you and like, oh my gosh, the world has stood up against me and they're discriminating against me, and like I can't get this loan and this investor won't talk to me, and you can get wrapped up in that and go have a pity party and feel sorry for yourself and allow your dreams to be crushed before you really even got started. Or you can go, okay, yep, I accept that. Yes, it sucks. Ouch. Yes, that hurts. Am I going to keep going? Yes, I am
Yeah.
going to. Yes, no matter what. So I accept it and I move on. Right. And that's just where I am in my life right now. I said, like, I'm really uncomfortable. I don't know what's next, but I just accept that. And I'm going to relax in God's will for me and know that God has a plan for me. And I don't need to know what's next. I believe God is looking out for me, and He only wants what's best for me. So when we get there, we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you what's next because we're gonna put a pause here. What's next is part two of this conversation. So we'll end this. We're gonna end this one here. We had a hard stop, but there is so much more to talk about, especially the remainder of some of your experiences with the SEAL team, but then also your entrepreneurial journey. Oh man, this is great,
I
Ty.
can't wait.
Thank
Let's
you.
do it, brother.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, thanks, Ty.
You got it.